if you look closely, you'll see that they like gave a crap when they put their clothes on. Like
Yes.
there's intentionality there, not like in the high maintenance way.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simone Monet, and this is Halo Image and Energy Consulting, where we merge the world of personal development and personal style to help women with big dreams get to their next best level in life, whatever that may look like for you. So, if you're interested in learning how to use what you got to get what you want, then just keep watching. Today, we're doing something a little bit different for the channel. As you may have seen from my many recent Instagram posts this past week, I was in Paris, France, doing a little vacationing, a little fashion scouting, and I brought on a very special guest to talk about all things Paris and fashion. Today, we have the lovely Gina Dunn here, who comes from a marketing communications background like myself, but has most recently published her first book, claps for that, called Paris Possibilities: Stop Doubting, Start Believing, and Take Your Paris Vacation. She made her way from Boston to Paris in 2015, and before settling in as a Parisian marketing powerhouse, she spent some time in the world of fashion herself. It's so great to have you on, Gina. So, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, Simone, and for all of those kind words. I try to be a powerhouse. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I cannot wait to hear all your insights about your time in Paris and your time in the fashion world. But before we get started, if you guys like this content, please be sure to like and subscribe so that you can never miss a new upload. And so actually, my therapist and your friend gave me this book in preparation for my trip because I'm not going to lie, I was super nervous about the solo travel aspect of things. Going to Europe from America is a big deal. And I read it cover to cover, and it was so extremely helpful, just the minute details and even just learning about the broader culture of Paris. So tell me, I mean, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, like you, when I first went to Paris, I had to go solo, and I was afraid as well. And the thing is, when I first went, like my intention was not to go by myself at all. Like I had made plans with my friends and we are all going to go. And I was super excited, of course. And then, like many people, I mean, who've had the experience of wanting and planning to travel with others, as it gets closer to actually going, people tend to fall off. And in my case, everybody fell off. And, there was this moment where it was like, oh, I guess I can't go. And then I thought about how I grew up in Tallahassee and I moved to Boston, and everyone was so afraid for me to move to Boston where I didn't know anyone, and how was I going to, survive? And I thought to myself, Gina, if you waited for someone to come with you every time you decide to take a leap or go somewhere, you would have never left the city of Tallahassee, let alone the state of Florida. So, yeah, like that um, was I guess, the starting point of me writing that book, because I knew that I was afraid, but I also wanted or needed something that would answer the questions that I had and encourage others who are afraid to travel by themselves and have this dream of going, like something that they could hold on to answer those questions and to keep them inspired. And as the book says, to stop doubting and start believing that they can take that trip. And one of the questions that I had and that it ultimately came down to was, is Paris safe and welcoming for someone like me? Because, you know, you see rich people or very rich people or celebrities. The American Girl in Paris tends to look one way. Sabrina, a white woman, Emily in Paris, another white woman with dark hair. Good for her. They got the dark hair thing going. Um, but it was important to me that for anyone who looks like me to say, okay, that person's over there and they've had that trip and they look like me. Well, maybe I can too.
So
So,
I'm also kind of curious, like, why Europe in general? You know, like you're from America, like what drew you to that part of the world?
Well, my parents, both of them were in the military. And at some point in my life when I was like a toddler, they were stationed in Germany. So the entire time I was growing up, uh, I always had this sort of fascination, and not so much about Germany or Europe, but just really anyone from abroad. Like for me, I was the most annoying person when it came to a study abroad student coming to our school for like a week or so. It's like, oh, and what's it like there? And blah blah blah. Blah. And when we went to Disney World, I think it was for like high school or middle school for a field trip. Like Disney World wasn't that exciting to me. It was the fact that people from everywhere were there. Maybe the thing that really drew me to Europe in the end, as far as like living here, was the whole fashion component. So, as you probably know, three of the big four fashion weeks are in Europe. And when I decided at some point to travel around Europe for a few months, at the same time pursue the field of fashion, I was really sort of following the fashion weeks and figuring out how I could make some sort of inroad. So, I mean, one might say in the end, it was fashion that brought me to Europe as a whole.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I agree. Fashion is what brought me to Paris to begin with. I mean, I wanted a vacation, but I also really wanted to see like what one of the biggest fashion capitals in the world like really had to offer. Like what was the hype about? What can I learn? How can I immerse myself in this experience? So I totally, totally get that. And now that we're talking about fashion, I just want to point out to the audience that Gina and I did not plan this look.
No.
Um, we're twinning today, but I guess great minds think alike.
There
So
you go. There you go.
joy. So, I mean, I love hearing about all your glamorous adventures, but my audience, you know, they're probably not trying to work out Margiela. So let's kind of like root it back down to earth here and discuss a little bit more about like day-to-day fashions. Like what have you noticed like are some of those key differences in like style and like fashion vibes between like the US and Paris, and like what do you see in the women there just like walking around in the street that is a little bit different than what you witnessed like growing up in the US? And I know I've just during my trip alone I saw so many key differences, but I'm curious to
Mhm.
know, like your reaction as well.
Think for me, like maybe, well, I think the men one is kind of almost like obvious or something. Like the clothes fit much differently, I guess you could say. Uh they are more fitted. So that's like the biggest one. Like you can always tell like maybe an American businessman walking around in Paris versus like a European businessman. Like the suits kind of hang off the American, whereas like in Paris, at least, the suits fit in a sense. So like that's the first one. But I mean, as far as the women, and it's kind of difficult to say, but there are things. But I just want to preface it with France is a big country, the US is a big country, and even in there, there's different demographics of people. And even in, I don't know if you've noticed, but depending on the neighborhood you're in Paris, people actually dress differently. So than each other. But maybe the biggest thing I would say is there's no like casual wear outside. Like, I don't like know about you, but when I was in college, it was perfectly normal for people to show up in their pajamas. Um, and that's like one level. And that's not really something I think I've seen in Paris, people walking around in their pajamas. Um, but then like the next level up, which might almost seem kind of who cares, but you feel it when you're the only person doing it, is that people don't really wear gym clothes outside of the gym. And that's unless it's like the cool sweatpant look that's styled. But when it comes to like just like everyone, like people are just wearing Lululemons or their Nike running pants, like even to the grocery store. Like I remember one time I tried to do the whole like, oh, I'm gonna go for a jog and then I'm gonna go pick up some water and la 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 la. It was like I tried not to give in to peer pressure, but it was the most uncomfortable thing. I'm like walking around the grocery store and I'm feeling like I'm literally the only person who looked like I just came from the gym. Like I really just looked like I didn't care. The other thing might be is makeup. Like makeup is quite different. I would say like it really is all about like the skin kind of thing, like the glowing skin. And even though like depending on like the age bracket, I do feel like they are kind of getting more into like the matte look and this, that, and the other. But a lot of times it's really like the skin looking fresh and supple and a swipe of eyeliner there and a strong lip. And then like that's really kind of it. Um, Another thing, which is, and maybe this is more about like the hair, but like natural hair, frizzy hair, it's perfectly okay. Like which seems almost contradictory. Like when it's like, you can't wear your regular gym clothes however you want, but you can wear your hair however you want. But like, really, people like this is natural and this is how it grows, so this is perfectly okay. Um, and that's one thing that I definitely have noticed. But the other thing is, I feel like people have their even if it doesn't look super dressed up or super trendy or super stylish, and as I mentioned in like the book, like, and even if you don't like it, if you look closely, you'll see that they like gave a crap when they put their clothes on. Like
Yes.
there's intentionality there, not like in the high maintenance way, and not even in like someone's like, oh, I'm going to be glamorous, but like I have friends who like they definitely like dress up, and I have others that like what they want to do is roam the earth and go to places that may or may not have running water. But even when I see them, they might have like a swipe of lipstick and their little scarf tied, and it's like, okay, they cared. They cared. And I think
Yeah.
not to say that Americans don't, but I feel at least the Parisians that I've experienced, they always do in a sense. So yeah.
It is so crazy because I have so many of the same observations, like, um, the little details, right? Like
Yeah.
an interesting scarf around the neck or a funky sunglass or a bright trouser, and like the rest of them is very casual. And also I feel like it really, the way they dress well really kind of busts that myth of like you can't be comfortable and look presentable at the same time.
Mm,
Like, everyone is in sneakers, but also, a nice flowy dress that is simple and just, like, easy to throw on, but, like,
yeah.
there are tiny little details where people, like, express themselves through what they're wearing, and it's not all fully glam. And I feel like with the Americans, like, we have this, like, dichotomy of, like, I just rolled out of bed and I don't give a crap about whatever today, or I'm fully done up,
Yeah.
full beat, full blowout, and I'm in heels and a tube dress. It's like
Right, right, right. There's no middle ground.
there's no middle ground. And I feel like there's this whole idea that like it's so much effort, it's so time consuming, it's so uncomfortable to like simply dress yourself. And
It
I
doesn't have to be that way.
No, it really doesn't have to be that way if you just have a little bit of intentionality about, like, the pieces you buy, the things that are
Yeah.
prominent in your wardrobe. I have a whole video on my channel called, like, "Burn Your Sweatpants."
And then
Just burn them because, like, I love my Lululemon and everything just like everybody else, and I love being comfortable, but if you kind of curate your wardrobe to actually serve a purpose and like serve your look and like the goals you're trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis, like it doesn't have to be hard picking out something that works for you and something that, like amplifies your mood that day instead of,
yeah.
making you feel like you're still in bed. So it's just so interesting to see how effortless they are able to like achieve these looks and express themselves. But I also read in your book that in Paris, you kind of felt like people felt like they never like it was never too early to be dressed up. It was never the
Mm.
wrong time to be dressed well. And you also like told this story about like being on a park bench and like you were taking pictures of
Oh,
yourself.
yeah.
And this guy
Speaking
comes
of
up to you and he's like well dressed, but he probably also might be like down and out, you know.
yeah.
So it's just super interesting, like in saying that like you don't have to be rich to be dressed well. So could you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I feel like Americans, we kind of have this thing of like, oh, well, if she's dressed up, she must be bougie and rich. And like, you know, I get that all the time. Like, why are you so dressed up? Like, what's all going on there? And I'm just like, I'm just vibing and like expressing myself. So
I think I mean, I am a believer in if you look good, you feel good. And I think I've read this in I don't know some of the historical books on France and fashion, and maybe even some of like the homeless population. It was it's I might be down and out, but that doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself. That doesn't mean that I don't care about how I look. Um, so that's one side of it. Um, I think there's that story, but then there's this other story where it may have been like my first year of like living in Paris, and I'm just going to the laundromat. It's Saturday. I don't know. It's like 9:30 in the morning. Like, who cares? Like, and I'm sitting there. I don't think I might have on like running pants and like a t-shirt. It's like really like who cares, right? And clearly I didn't. But then this woman comes in and she's like, she must have been maybe like 60 or something. And she just looked gorgeous. Like her hair is pulled back. I remember she had on like this blue dress that was like a chic dress, like kind of like fitted and whatever. And like she wasn't like super skinny or anything like that, but like she cared about which like she looked like, and she had on like a nice swipe of the lip and remember a nice little shimmer to the eye, and she just looked gorgeous. And I'm like, lady, like here I am, like being shown up at 9:30 in the morning by like this woman who's like, yeah, I'm doing my laundry, you know? And like to me, like that really did kind of epitomize this idea of like it's never too early to look nice, like and like I didn't necessarily feel bad about myself or anything. And at the same time, it was like when you see someone dressed nice, like it's on you, like how you walk away from that. Like you can see someone and be like, oh my God, that's beautiful. And, you know, anytime we see something that's beautiful, I think it, kind of lifts our mood or spirit a little bit. Like it would have been on me to be like, oh my God, I'm the worst or something like that, as opposed to just being like, hmm, okay, all right.
like
Like,
I could do that too. If this 60
right,
year old woman
exactly.
is up at 9 a.m. doing her laundry looking like this, like why can't I?
Right. And at the end of the day, like, what did she do? She put on a blue dress, she swiped some lipstick, probably some moisturizer, and a slight shimmer to her eye and pulled her hair back.
Yeah.
Like, it, like her action of doing that probably took just as long as it took for me to say that. And I think that also kind of comes down to like what we even have in our wardrobes. Like
Mm.
it's when you have the clothes that you love, um, and that doesn't mean you have to have a whole bunch of them. Like if you have the clothes that you really love, you can look dressed up all day, every day, but you're just wearing the things that you have and the things that you love.
Right. Like it's just what is in your wardrobe. And that is kind of what I'm trying to get at when I'm talking about this stuff in my videos or when I'm doing closet edits with clients. It's like if you and put that intentionality behind what you're curating and what is available to you, it becomes really easy to just pick anything from your wardrobe,
Mhm.
anything from your drawers, and it's gonna be, like, fitted well to your body. It's gonna be, in your wheelhouse of, like, your authentic style, and it's gonna make you feel good rather than, like, holding on to, like, your most holy, most stained T-shirts and
Right, right.
things that don't make sense, don't add to you in any sort of way. So it's just like a lot of that mindset work at the outset if you're someone that's trying to elevate your style, elevate your sense of self, and like making those shifts at the beginning that like kind of make it easier for you to make simple, quick decisions that
No,
make
for
you
sure.
look and feel your best. So kind of I feel like they just have a different mindset over there. You know, like what they have available to them looks good, it makes them feel good, and like it's easier to almost make those choices on a second to second basis.
For sure. I do think there's staples, uh, that a lot of Parisians have in their closet. Of course, like one of them is probably the trench coat, and people have various different types of trenches, but I feel like everyone has one. They have their ballet flat. They may not always wear it, but they have it. It's like I feel sometimes like we want to make it more complicated than it is. It's like have the pieces you love and sprinkle it, like have your basics, however that fits within like your own aesthetic, and then sprinkle it with, a few extras like here and there. But make sure you also love those pieces as well. Because like your style never goes out of style. And I feel like I see more of that in Paris where it's like, there's some trendy things going on, but people they're wearing the things that they like. They may not always be the trendiest thing, but it's like, this is what I like.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I like what you just said about how like people will complicate things because sometimes I feel like we will complicate things so we can get out of doing them.
I like that.
We build them up in our minds so that we don't have to take that risk or don't have to do the work of like tweaking things over time or purchasing with more intention.
Mm,
So just like realizing that the little bit of effort in the beginning can really make a difference over time. And then after a while, like you don't have to be stressed out about what you're choosing on a day-to-day basis because like now everything in your wardrobe is like your personal style that doesn't go out of style. And
exactly.
also, if you're not trying to keep up with every single trend on Shein, what you're wearing is going to always be in style. I definitely noticed, like you said, there wasn't too much trendy, like things going on, especially even with the younger girls in Paris. Like when I see a group of girls here, it's like, they're all kind of dressed the same. They all have, whatever the latest like Instagram look is, which
Oh
is
yeah,
fine. Like I'm sure they're having fun with it. And we all, fall into those things at some point. But I don't know. I just noticed like everyone had like their own self-expression for the most part. And I thought that that was really beautiful, and I think that when we get really authentic, that can make us just feel better and move differently, in the world. Um, so yeah,
I'd agree.
I really hope this helps some people kind of realize that there are other options, there are different ways to show up and express yourself, and it doesn't have to be so complicated and so hard.
A thing for me where it's kind of like you don't have to shop all the time. When you do shop, make it count.
Right.
So
Definitely that quality over quantity mindset for sure. And those things will end up lasting longer. If they're classic pieces, they won't really go out of style. Like that trench coat you were talking about, like that will last you a really long time.
because
Um,
if you liked it, oh, sorry, go on.
oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say like if you're buying things that are classic and you're buying it in a style that you particularly like, it will be a long time before it ever goes out of style. Like, because like your own personal style can like never like be a trend kind of thing. So I mean, I feel like when people really dial into the fact that like, yeah, like there's no replicating you. There's no being cool or uncool if it's really you. Like it's owning who you are. Um, and maybe the final thing I might say is that like I feel like in Paris, like it's more about you wearing the clothes than the clothes wearing you. And maybe that's a little bit why I kind of almost keep going back to like, yeah, my hair and my skin and like, cause it's almost like you're taking care of the body and you're putting the clothes like on it. But like ultimately, like the sex appeal and the confidence and the coolness, it comes from you. And you're just your clothing is like another expression of that. But for the most part, I feel like that is it's almost like the key to style. It
Mm.
like ends with the self in a sense.
Yeah, like it's an extension of you rather than you putting on a bunch of stuff that masks who you are or smothers you. It's like you said, the clothes wearing you versus you wearing the clothes. And definitely, guys, be sure to pick up Paris Possibilities if you are taking a trip. And where can they find this as well?
They can find it on Amazon or they can actually order it directly from parispossibilities.com. So
Amazing. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about like your specific interests in fashion? Like, what was your specific route? You were telling me earlier how, fashion can be very, very broad. Like, what were your specific interests? And yeah, we'd love to know a little bit more about that.
okay. So I knew when I left, I think it was like my 8-year career in human resources, and right after getting a master's degree in corporate communications with a focus on human resources management, that suddenly now I wanted to work in fashion communications and not HR anymore. And so I settled on fashion PR. It was yeah between that one and maybe like corporate writing for a fashion company. So that's what I was thinking I was going to do. So when I left Boston for those 3 months, it was very. I don't know anyone in Milan. I know one person in Paris. None of them work in the fashion industry, but I'm going to figure out how I can possibly make my way in. And mind you, I probably spoke very little Italian, and my French, I don't have 4 years of French like you when I left anyway. And so it really was a matter of talking to random people on the street and sort of immersing myself in the I guess in like the spectacle of it all because that's really as far as I could get. I was fortunate enough where my first point of contact with interacting with individuals in the fashion space in Europe, everyone was super nice. And by my first point of contact, I was literally sitting in my friend's apartment in Fairfax, actually, and just sending my resume and cover letter to just random companies and fashion houses and PR companies in Milan saying, "Hey, can I help out? Can I help out?" And people would get back to me like, "Oh, can you send me, um, more information and how long are you going to be here?" And la 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 la. But I found out very quickly that for the most part in Europe, you really do have to be uh, in an educational institution for you to intern. Like there is no like strictly volunteering like the way that we can skirt the line in the US, I've noticed, but that's another topic. But anyway, so while I was in Milan, it was like it was the perfect setup or entry for all the things that would come next. Because somehow my Airbnb ended up being down the street from this really famous fashion street, and I got to see and on this street there were like huge fashion shows, and I got to see Scott Schumann, the sartorialist, and people I didn't even know who they were at the time, like I forget her name, but like Kiera Ferraghi or something. Like she's this big Italian fashion influencer, and like I just got to really be immersed almost in the space of all these fashion shows and the hoopla around it. And everyone was nice. So everyone was kind, and they wanted to know what I was doing. And to be honest, I didn't know. Like it felt like I had just left my whole like career, and it was like, so what are you doing here? And I'm like, uh, yeah. I There's nothing I can say that doesn't feel like it sounds stupid. So yeah, I'm just checking things out or whatever. And so that kind of ended in Milan, and then I went on to Paris because that's where I was going to, and I got lucky. There's an American company that was hosting a it was like basically like a place where all of the emerging designers were showing their goods, I guess you could say. And a lot of these emerging designers, like they go on to do big things, but like this is almost a starting point. And that's where it was really solidified for me that I wanted to help emerging designers. Like that's what I wanted to do. Like they had that sort of, yes, like we're gonna do this, but they didn't know exactly what they were doing. Like we're all kind of in the same boat. And so I met this guy named Tiago, who he was a fashion PR, and he had a PR agency in London, and he was offering an internship. So this whole time, I have a friend who has an apartment, let's say in London, and she's like, "Oh, you should come to London and stay there." Blah blah blah. And I was like, "I don't want to go to London." But when this internship came up, I was like, "Okay, I'm going to London." And so I go, and the PR agency isn't really a PR agency. It's more like mm, they have an apartment and they have a few clients, but I was their first intern apparently. And so I ended up going back to the US for a couple of months, coming back to this internship. And at one point, like I'm sitting in London with a backstage pass for London Fashion Week. Jordan Dunn is walking by. In all fairness, I didn't know who she was, but I thought it was cool. We had the same last name. Um, and like one of the girls that was working for this PR agency, like she ended up being like the front or the model who leads like the show for like Celine like a few years later. So there's all these people like kind of coming up and it's together. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm sitting here with a backstage pass for London Fashion Week. I'm truly helping out. And this is 6 months from the time that I left my job. Like, I couldn't have imagined it. Um, no one else could have imagined it. Because I remember one girl specifically saying to me, like, do you think that they're really going to accept you over there? Like, do you think this is really going to work? Like, you're Black, you're not rich, and you're not even skinny. And I was like, well, I might be one day.
Might get skinny, I don't know, might get rich.
Right, right. No, really. It's like, okay, whatever. But like a lot can happen in 6 months. Like, and the thing is we never really know. And so during that time, like a lot did happen. I got that backstage pass. I was, working for like a month or so. It was supposed to be 6, and then it didn't happen. And then I was just kind of in London, and it was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I know I want to be in Europe now. Okay. Education has always kind of been the thing that has enabled me to move forward. And so that's when I was like, okay, this is how this can work. I can go to a school that offers something in fashion. And I was like, I'm going to look in Milan, London, and in Paris. And it just so happens that there's a university in Paris that took rolling admission, so that made it possible for me to go um, basically 6 months from that point. So I went to 6 months later, I was in Paris. 6 months after that, I was actually interning at Maison Margiela, which it was really cool. And like most things, for some reason in my life, uh, I think I'll preface it with this. a lot of times we don't go after the thing that seems impossible, and then we never find out, and we never know if it's possible for us. We never find out the true meaning of what's for you is for you. And in my case, like at the time, I think I was like, I don't know, I may have been 31, 32. And I really thought like, how is this gonna work? Like, no one's gonna hire me. And even though I had some experience in the fashion space, I still didn't feel completely comfortable enough to be like, okay, someone's gonna hire me. And I remember even having this feeling of feeling dismissed by a lot of the administration and a lot of the students. Because one thing I've noticed about Paris and like the fashion space is that once you're inside, you kind of realize that everyone is like, okay, it's a job. It's a job that I like, but it's also a job. And I didn't really see as much as like the inflated ego thing where it's like, "Ugh, I work in fashion." Like I didn't see a lot of that. Um, it was more like relax kind of thing. And so anyway, um, I remember at some point I was taking a fashion journalism course and I just wanted to know the other side of public relations. Like what, gets what is it that the journalist wants from the PR? And somehow or another, I was like, I'm going to be the first person to get invited to a fashion show. So I send out a random request to go to a fashion show. And I'm thinking, okay, one of them I'll hear back from. And I actually hear back from an agency that's like, hey, if you stuff envelopes for us, you can go to our fashion shows. And
Okay, hi guys. Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty, but we are jumping back in. Gina was just telling us about how she kind of weaseled her way into her first fashion show.
yes, well, you know what? I want to make a little bit of a correction because there are people who weasel themselves
I
in.
don't want to say weasel. Maybe that wasn't
Because I was afraid of getting deported, so there was no weaseling.
okay.
Someone didn't let me in the front, I wasn't going. Not because I was a snob, but more just because it was like, listen, unless they invited me, I don't want to get in trouble. But basically, what ended up happening was there was this agency that for couture week, I guess you could say, they said, hey, if you know, help us with our invites mailing, you can get access to our fashion show. So I went to this show and I went to like the shows and I, of course, had like the most amazing time. Like seeing all of these clothes that are just of amazing like quality and expression and just like nothing you're ever really going to see in your real life. And so I write this story about this show that I went to, and I basically use that article to go to other shows without having to stuff as many envelopes. And I thought I was going to get like maybe one or two invites. And I remember saying to myself, if they invite you, you're kind of obligated to write about it. And I was like, well, only two people or two like fashion houses are going to invite me. And I think I got like 10. Like every day I would come home and it would be like an invite under my door. And I'm like, I can't write about all these things, like all these shows. Like I'm not ready for this or whatever. So yeah. So the semester was winding down. I had made a few friends who like were also interns, much younger in the fashion industry. And one one of them was interviewing in for their internship, and I was like interviewing because I wanted to work for the French Federation of Fashion, and I didn't get that job. And my friend goes in for their interview, and they say, "Hey, I got the job." He didn't tell me where he was interviewing, and he goes, "But they're looking for another PR assistant. Would you be interested? And if you are, you need to email them right now." And I was like, okay. And it was Maison Margiela. And I literally send my resume like immediately. I think it was like a Wednesday. The woman, I think it was like Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And she's like, "Can you come in on Friday?" I go in on Friday. She interviews me and she's like, "Okay, well, I have another colleague that will probably need to interview you as well." So Monday, I send a email, thanking them for, interviewing me and hopefully I'll get the second interview. And instead the response is, "You're hired." And I was just like, yay, yay. And those 6 months were definitely a learning experience. But it was unlike anything that I could have ever imagined. Excuse me. Um, like I remember when I saw Scott Schumann on the street in Milan, like the sartorialist, and him being kind and whatnot, and just like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." And then speed ahead, I don't know, like a year and a half later, and I'm welcoming him into the fashion show for Maison Margiela, and it was like, this is like really full circle, and much to the craziness of Kanye, like almost like one of the highlights of the my time at Margiela was it was the Christmas party and they were playing like what's I forget the song exactly, but it's like what's that jacket Margiela? And I'm like, I'm in Margiela kind of thing. So yeah, so
Just
after
that
that,
feeling of, like, "I'm really here," like, "Wow."
right, no, really,
Yeah.
really, it was really that. Um so yeah, like after that, like it was like, okay, if I really want to do fashion PR, I did a little bit more writing, got invited to actually Amsterdam Fashion Week a couple of times to write for them. But there was this moment of it was almost like everything felt like it was moving really fast in a way. Like, can I do this? Or who do they think I am? Like, how am I getting invited to this? Because like it was the imposter syndrome, I guess you could say, like came in fast and strong. So um at some point though, I decided to stay in Paris. Like this is where I was like, I want to stay in Paris. And the thing is, the bar for staying in Paris as far as income is much higher than what an entry level role in fashion usually pays. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to go the communications route. So, and like work for, like I was always interested in tech and always interested in a sense, like politics or governmental, non-governmental global organizations. And eventually I said, okay, I'm going to work for myself. So yeah. So it's sort of in fashion, then out of fashion. And you can't really get away from fashion in Paris. So yeah.
That is a roller coaster of a story, but also somewhat just trekking up, like, the trajectory of, you know, climbing that ladder and getting into spaces and meeting people, and it's beautiful to see how it can just escalate even more quickly
Yeah.
than you thought, which is, I feel like, the best problem to have.
This is also true. This is
Yeah.
true.
But I think that is all we had for today. Thank you again, Gina, so much for coming on. I'm sure like everyone's gonna love hearing all your insights. And definitely, guys, be sure to pick up Paris Possibilities if you are taking a trip. And where can they find this as well?
They can find it on Amazon or they can actually order it directly from parispossibilities.com. So,
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again. And yeah, talk to you soon.
all right. Talk to you soon and thank you.
Bye.